Look, I just don't want to talk about it. It grosses me out. But the church says, I just know it's wrong. It makes me uncomfortable. As young Christians, we've been examining the sexuality debate for most of our mature spiritual lives. After much reading, researching, praying, and careful consideration of both sides of the debate, we have come to realize the validity and beauty of same-sex relationships.
Disclaimer, if you're not religious, then this video might not exactly be something you're interested in watching. This is a religious argument. That being said, you're definitely welcome to comment, to watch it, to share it, whatever.
What prompted this video was a presentation made by an influential anti-gay activist in my community, part of the organization Serving Leaders Ministry. He gave a speech on my campus, which was so full of wrong information that we felt called to set the record straight, in so many words.
Some of our points have been inspired by or blatantly taken from gay Christian author and speaker Matthew Vines. I'll link below his video that sums up like most of his points. It's about an hour long, so if you have an hour and you're interested in this topic, definitely go watch it. He's just articulate.
Unlike her.
I'm not. He's articulate, he's just amazing and smart, and he works very closely with biblical texts, and it really is a beautiful speech, so check that out.
Okay, first let's talk about the word homosexuality. Homosexuality in the Bible is very different from the homosexuality we know today. Out of 31,102 verses in the Bible, there are only 6 specific instances where homosexuality is referenced. And they all deal with rape, excessive lust, or people turning away from God to idolatry.
This is very different than what we are talking about in modern homosexuality. We are talking about a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, wanting to come together in a loving, God-fearing, monogamous relationship, wanting to form a family that is God-fearing, loving, and nurturing.
The word homosexual wasn't even termed until 1892 by a German psychiatrist, and that was way after the compilation of scripture we know as the Bible today. So whenever you see the word homosexual in the Bible, you know it holds a different connotation than the word we know today.
1 Corinthians chapter 6 verses 9 through 11 is often quoted because it talks about homosexuality in a list of like super bad sins. The King James Version of the Bible, which was published way before the gay rights movement, which was like around the 1920s, states it as abusers of themselves with mankind. This was edited in many more modern translations, such as the Eastern Standard Bible, as men who practice homosexuality. But those are two different things.
The distinction here is kind of important. Abusers of themselves with mankind holds a different connotation culturally, as it was often associated with extortion, often of a sexual nature. This is wildly different than homosexual relationships we know today.
Alright, and then the two other verses that we're going to talk about real quick are 2 that can be found in Leviticus, which is the Old Testament. These can basically be thrown out because they're the old law, and Christ came to fulfill the old law, which makes the old law obsolete.
In a passionate letter talking about pretty much the same thing, Paul says to the Galatians, "For if righteousness could be found through the law, then Christ died in vain."
Which is why we don't have to keep kosher, we can wear wool and leather at the same time, and why we can charge interest on loans.
A more profound and analytical exploration into these and the other 3 verses can be found in the Matthew Vines video we talked about before. We could try to rehash the same exact arguments, but we would really be doing his speech a disservice.
Yeah, literally just check it out. The link is below. Do it. In contemporary biblical times, there were instances of same-sex relationships that weren't full of lust and immorality. It was prevalent enough that Greek theologians and theorists of the time wrote about it. And we can read about it. If you're interested, look it up. The Bible doesn't talk about these. It talks about these sexual immoral acts and lustful acts. It does the same thing with heterosexual relationships.
While we are talking about contemporary ideas needing to be translated into a more modern setting, there are a number of outdated biblical ideas that have to be applied differently into our cultural setting. Predominantly, women in the Bible. there are way more explicitly misogynistic verses in the Bible than homophobic texts in the Bible.
To cite one, 1 Corinthians 14, chapter 14, 34. Women should be kept silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but should be in submission. If there is anything they desire to learn, they should ask their husbands at home. For it is shameful for a woman to speak in a church.
Ephesians 5:22-23. Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head to the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so wives should submit to their husbands in everything.
We are not trying to discredit the Bible, and the church doesn't even follow these practices anymore. In fact, there are schools of thought and specific classes you can take that are all focused on translating feminism and women in the Bible to more modern day. So why isn't the same thing happening for homosexuals?
A final note on specifically homosexual content in the Bible. Many pro-gay activists are fond of saying that Jesus never said anything about homosexuality in the Bible.
As a counter-argument, a lot of anti-gay people like to say that Matthew 19, verses 4 through 5, Jesus states, "Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them man and female? Therefore, man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife." Clearly, Jesus said man and woman, not man and man.
But Jesus' words here are in response to the question, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause? The focus of the question here is on divorce, not homosexuality.
Jesus doesn't mention sex at all in this. It's not about homosexual or lustful behavior. It's about marriage practices. Alright, now that we have set out some definitions and context of the argument we'll be working with, we want to move to more specifics about this presentation that went on at her campus and kind of explain why all those points were mega wrong.
The reason why we're using this presentation specifically is because it holds prime examples of the fallacies in anti-gay arguments.
A big argument I hear all the time is that it's unnatural, that the man is supposed to go into the woman to make a baby, and that's it. That's the human body. If you're a little squeamish and don't like stuff about the human body, you might want to plug your ears and wait till you see Mary speaking on the screen next, because it's time for an anatomy lesson. Alright, men have prostates, women don't. The prostate is located in the male rear end. When stimulated, this prostate can cause a man to orgasm. Not to make some of you uncomfortable, but the male G-spot is literally located in his butt. And that might seem obvious to some of you, but you'd be shocked by the amount of people that were like, so surprised when I told them this. Alternatively, the female can achieve orgasm without penetration, just through stimulation of the clitoris. That's just how the human body works as well. Why would God make homosexual sex so possible and easy if it were unnatural?
Another major issue discussed is the idea that fluidity or bisexuality is wrong. The American Psychological Association, which is frequently misinterpreted and taken outside of context throughout this presentation, explains, research over several decades demonstrated that sexual orientation ranges along a continuum, from exclusive attraction to the other sex to exclusive attraction to the same sex.
Meaning, you don't have to be 100% attracted to one sex or the other. Many believe that straying from this black and white idea of sexuality is wrong, that if you develop same-sex attraction or love later on in your life, or if you were previously with someone of the opposite sex, and you're with someone of the same sex, that this also indicates some kind of sexual immorality. But sexual and emotional development is something that happens throughout your entire life, and it is especially hard for queer teens who come from a rejecting household to explore their sexuality. So in the confusing and often painful journey of self-discovery, of course there's going to be late bloomers.
Our whole lives, we develop in many ways, such as our abilities, our passions, our God-given talents, and none of those are demonized in the same way that sexuality is.
And if we can believe someone can be attracted to and love someone of the opposite gender, and the same can be true of someone of the same gender, why is it so hard to believe that it is possible for someone to have the same kind of feelings for either of the genders? People love to group homosexuality with much worse sexual activities, such as pedophilia, necrophilia, and bestiality. First off, This is ridiculously offensive to even suggest that they are in the same category. I wouldn't even think we would have to bring this up if it wouldn't keep coming up in debates of sexuality. And of course, it was on this stupid presentation that hundreds of people watched in Mary's college that we just, of course, have to bring it up and explain the obvious.
So the obvious major difference here is that same-sex relationships are consensual and centered around love and emotional connections. They are not immoral or abusive fetishes. Those fetish disorders, the object of attraction here, cannot consent, be it a child or an animal or a dead body. Come on, people.
This video is obviously about tackling much bigger issues and things that are presented in this one argument by this one guy who's associated, let's just get that name out there a whole lot, serving leaders ministry. That's right. Yeah, don't like them.
But we just have to bring up the fact that in one specific slide, he had pictures of Ellen DeGeneres and other cultural influences coming out. And among those, he had this picture. Does he think Obama's gay?
Why? Why is Obama right there? America's first gay president. No! The next point that made us explosively frustrated works in this larger argument that asks, what causes homosexuality? That presentation follows this bizarre and scientifically inaccurate argument that is, homosexuality can be caused. Also, that presentation does an excellent job of one of the worst things you can do when arguing, which is taking quotes completely out of context and chopping it up to fit your argument.
One of his main points is that people aren't born that way. He tries to build up this argument that it's all nurture and no nature, that family dynamics, such as a strong paternal or maternal influence on young childhood or childhood abuse, can cause someone to become queer. He uses this quote from the American Psychological Association. To date, there are no replicated scientific studies supporting any specific biological etiology for homosexuality.
What he doesn't include is the very next sentence. Similarly, no specific psychological or family dynamic cause for homosexuality has been identified, including histories of childhood sexual abuse. Sexual abuse does not appear to be more prevalent in children who grow up to identify as gay, lesbian, or bisexual than in children who identify as heterosexual. First of all, that's just a terrible debate strategy. Why not pull a quote from someone that doesn't completely argue against what you're trying to argue?
This APA quote in its entirety is the whole point. We don't know what causes homosexuality, just like we don't know what caused many human behaviors. All fields of mental health have come to understand that it is not nature versus nurture, but a combination of nature and nurture. He does this again with a different APA quote, saying,
there is no consensus among scientists about the exact reason that an individual develops a heterosexual, bisexual, gay, or lesbian orientation. Although much research has examined the possible genetic, hormonal, developmental, social, and cultural influences on sexual orientation, no findings have emerged that permit scientists to conclude that sexual orientation is determined by any particular factor or factors. Many think that nature and nurture both play complex roles.
First of all, if anything, this quote proves that sexual orientation isn't caused by how one is raised. And secondly, he so cleverly left out the next sentence.
Most people experience little to no choice about their sexual orientation.
Because if it's involuntary, you can't pray the gay away. God forbid he tells a room full of students this very vital part of that study.
Don't cite something if you're going to chop it all up. You couldn't find a scientific or legitimate source to back up your argument? No. Shocking!
It doesn't matter what causes same-sex attraction or love. What matters is it's here, and it's not a choice. If it was a choice, why would so many people be killing themselves over such shame and regret and rejection?
Who would choose to be gay? Our society does its best to shit on queer people. From marriage laws to not equal opportunity in the workplace to even using the term as an insult, like gay or dyke or faggot.
While there are only 6 verses about homosexuality, there are 83 verses in the Bible about loving one another. We picked our favorites.
Mine is from 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 through 8. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love.
And mine is John 13:34 through 35. A new command I give to you: love one another. As I have loved you, so must you love one another. By this, everyone will know you are my disciples, if you love one another.
As Christians, what's important is to accept and to love. Who are we to cast the first stone? That was Jesus' whole message, to love one another as he has loved us. If you don't get that as a Christian, maybe it's you that need to do some soul searching and some reevaluating.
What's most tragic about this whole debate are the casualties wrought by rejection and ignorance and intolerance.
According to the Trevor Project, LGBT youths are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their straight peers. Those who are questioning their sexuality are 3 times more likely.
And LGBT youths from rejecting homes are 8.4 times more likely to attempt suicide than lesbian, gay, or bisexual teens from low or no rejection homes.
PFLAG New York City states that LGBT from high levels of family rejection during adolescence are 3 times more likely to try illegal drugs.
And between 25 and 50% of homeless youth are LGBT, and they are kicked out of their homes because of their sexual orientation or gender identity.
The Human Rights Campaign have found that compared to gay teens that come from no to low rejection homes, queer teens who come from high rejection homes are 8 times more likely to attempt suicide.
6 times more likely to report high depression levels.
3 times more likely to try illegal drugs.
And 3 times more likely to be at high risk for HIV and other STDs.
If you are still unconvinced because the church says so, just keep in mind that the church has been wrong before in giving out absolutions, in promoting illiteracy and slavery.
Also know that God made us rational human beings that constantly strive for the betterment of ourselves and our community. We are not at an apex of knowledge as a people. And just remember, as we continue to grow in understanding as a people of God, we are not above error.
As always, thank you so much for watching. We hope you learned something, or at least got the ball rolling with conversation with family or friends. Please feel free to share this video, to comment, or to contact either of us if you want to, chat or questions, whatever. Also, please share this video. It's important to spread the right kinds of messages. With that, God bless.